Hello, everybody from sunny Newton, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. I am Brendan Murray, and this is the PXM Pioneers Pulpit. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is the third edition of our new project here at Akeneo, putting the spotlight on different members of our community, including partners and customers like we had on a couple weeks ago, and this week, some of Akeneo's very own employees. Our guests this week are a pair of Akeneo consultants and PXM experts based here in Boston. So without further ado, let's introduce these two guys so you can meet them. First up is Brad Johnson. He joins us from his savvy looking office in Billerica. Brad is a functional consultant here at Akeneo. And Brad, thanks for taking some time out of what I know is a busy schedule for you to join us and share some insight with the folks at home.
Thanks, Brendan, so much. Like Brendan said, my name is Brad Johnson, and I'm a functional consultant here at Akeneo. Prior to this, I was a consultant for a dam company called Binder. Been with Akeneo for about a little over 2 years now.
Great. Thank you again, Brad, for coming on. And also joining us is Brad's fellow functional consultant here in Massachusetts. That's Adam Beatty. Adam, thanks to you as well for finding some time in your schedule to pencil us in. You want to say hi and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, Brendan. I'm also a functional consultant. Brad and I actually started basically the same week 2 years ago. Before I worked at Akeneo, I worked for IBM, working on ERP implementations. And in the last 2 years, I've been working with a variety of Akeneo customers and helping them launch successful projects. So happy to be here.
Awesome. So now that we've met our guests, we can dive into our discussion today. And really the reason I wanted to have you both here is because obviously from your introductions there, you have a lot of experience kind of hands-on with the PIM, helping Akeneo users and customers take advantage and utilize all different parts of the solution. So I kind of wanted to dive in and get some firsthand expertise from two people who really know the software just about as well as anybody here at Akeneo. So because you guys have a lot of experience, I think it makes sense to kind of start at the top with implementation. And as we've said a couple of times now, you guys have done a lot of implementations. You've worked with a lot of customers to get them up and running. And as a lot of people watching or listening later on probably know, there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of parts that go into an Akeneo implementation project. So I'd love to hear from you guys what sort of tips you have for people that are kind of just getting their PIM project off the ground, and starting off on implementation. So Adam, maybe you can start us off on this one and we can go from there.
Sure. Great question, Brendan. And I think Brad and I could talk all week about that. So there's a lot going on here. At a high level, if you're just about to kick off an Akeneo project, I think a key is to have a strategy. It sounds kind of obvious, but we very often see customers, they're enthralled by PIM and they love the product and they see, it's better than their current state, and they'll just kind of dive headfirst into a project. And we always say it's important to have a strategy, understanding what exactly you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to get a faster time to market with your new products? Are you looking to improve data governance? Are you trying to improve your SEO? Do you want to support future expansion? So understand that, have a strategy, and as you implement, work towards that. And then I'd also say it's important to remember that an Akeneo implementation really is a collaboration between the business team and the IT team. It's very cross-functional. It impacts many different players in an enterprise. So make sure everyone is working together and understands the overall objectives, and that there's a stakeholder who can kind of hold everyone accountable to make sure that the project proceeds.
Interesting. I think that's a really good point that you started off with there about kind of making sure you have a clear set of goals and objectives off the top, because it's important, I think, not only for setting things up, but also just kind of being able to benchmark and track yourself as you're moving along. And are you hitting those goals? And if not, what's stopping you? Brad, you obviously also have a lot of experience with this as well. What are some things that you think can pave the road to success when you're first kicking off an implementation?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things that often surprisingly gets overlooked is the amount of work that needs to happen before we get data into a PIM, before we kind of Akeneoize your data. So there's a large piece, which is kind of data transformation, fixing your data, making sure we have the correct attributes, the correct fields with the correct types, so that everything's not just a text field. Making sure that the systems that we're getting the data in from kind of work well with the data model that we've set up in Akeneo. But doing, I often tell people that I can teach you Akeneo and kind of the UI in an hour and a half. It's all of that other work of getting your data kind of nice and neat before we get it into the PIM. We don't want to just take exactly what you have today and kind of plop it into a PIM. We want to clean it, transform it, and kind of make it fit into the Akeneo way, so that we have a nice single source of truth that we know and are confident in that data.
Gotcha. Interesting. And as you mentioned that a lot of times it takes some work on the start end to make sure your data is well governed and well set up. Obviously a big mistake I can assume from that people make is not taking that time and not going through those steps to make sure they're prepared for a project. And it kind of makes me think, are there other kind of common mistakes or errors or even just challenges that pop up on this process? And do either of you have kind of some insights or tricks of the trade that you've used in your time to kind of overcome or troubleshoot these frequent problems?
Yeah.
Brad,
So
you can kick us off. Oh, Adam, go
Brad,
ahead.
Sorry.
we'll let Brad go.
All right, there we go.
Yeah. So, I think having, like I said, just having good data, but understanding, like Adam was saying, the problems we're solving for. Again, we don't want to just take what we have today and plop it into the PIM. I think that's something I find that is really troublesome, where we're hindered by some other systems or something to that effect, and really thinking about how we want to fix all of your data before, as we move along.
I think to add on to what Brad's saying, I think sometimes projects are driven largely by the IT team in some instances, and the people who can really fix and model data appropriately are going to be what we in Akeneo say are Julias. So those product content marketers, those people who, I always use this example. If I say SKU 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they say, "Oh yeah, I know that product." The people who really have that intimate knowledge of the products, those are the people that really, really need to be involved in this process of kind of improving a data model, cleaning up data, standardizing data. Akeneo, as powerful as it is, it's still just a tool. You still need to take that time as a business to understand what information you want to provide your customers, how you want to structure it, your internal workflows. So you really need to make sure you have those experts involved in the process.
Yeah,
That's
and
interesting.
Really,
Go
sorry, I was
ahead,
going
Brad.
to say, it really helps to understand how the Julias work, because that's really the problem at the end of the day that the PIM is solving for, is really increased efficiency in people's work, right? So really, like Adam said, having our Julias there is really key so that we can make their lives a little better.
And that kind of brings another question to mind, and it's admittedly not kind of on the list of topics I sent you guys to give people a peek behind the curtain. So if it's a curveball, I apologize. But you guys talk about a lot of different parts of the team there. You mentioned Julia's, you mentioned the business team and the IT team, both in that first question we talked about. So it's obviously just kind of not a one department or one team project. So do you have any advice for getting this kind of larger, more diverse group of roles and people on board with different priorities and getting everybody pulling in the same direction?
Sure. I think that process of getting everyone aligned, we help, right? So the Akeneo consultants are going to be involved in every enterprise project. So early on, just understanding the impacts. Of course, oftentimes there's one team at the company, could be the IT team, could be a marketing team that's kind of paying for the PIM and it's kind of their baby. But understanding very, very early the upstream and downstream impacts, right? Do I need inputs from the ERP? Okay, let's get our ERP team involved clearly. The e-commerce team, they're going to be receiving the data. What are they going to do with it? How do we support them? So really thinking about all the upstream and downstream impacts, what is going to be impacted by Akeneo, and just having a representative there and communicating what's going on. You don't want, this happens sometimes, I'll be in a workshop and we'll discover that we need to integrate Akeneo to a certain system, and I'll start asking questions and they'll say, "Oh, we don't know, we don't work with that system." And we say, "Okay, well, let's get a representative." And then a representative will come to the workshop, and they've never seen Akeneo, they don't even know what it is. And that's what we want to avoid. So just oftentimes just communicating. And sometimes even the stakeholders who sign the Akeneo contract or driving it, right, they don't even realize the impact. And so by communicating it, sometimes other systems and other representatives are going to say, hey, wait a minute, that could impact me. And then just by communicating it, they're going to come reach out to you. So just keeping everyone aware is really important, I think. And then from there, figuring out the impacts of Akeneo and the project. And opportunities too. So again, sometimes it's, this is a blocker, but sometimes there's opportunities outside of, what the original stakeholder thinks, hey, is there a certain issue we have with regulation? Let's see if we can bring our legal team into Akeneo. It's a great opportunity that would be missed if you aren't, perpetuating and telling everyone all about Akeneo and pushing it out there.
Brad, anything to add to Adam's answer there?
It was so good. Not really. No, but to his end, I think it's really important to have decision makers. So we're going to be making decisions about how the data is, about what it looks like in Akeneo. And if we don't have people there that can say, absolutely, yes, this is how it should be, it makes it really difficult and kind of drags it out a little longer than it can take. So having the right decision makers really about the products is really important, I think.
Got it. Got it. And Adam mentioned kind of at the top of his answer our enterprise edition, which is kind of the more well-known. We also obviously have a community edition for some smaller enterprises who are just getting their feet wet with PIM, as it were. And often we see companies kind of move from one to the other and get familiar with PIM on our community edition and decide they kind of want to take a step up and go to the enterprise edition. And I know there can be kind of particular things that can pop up in that process as you kind of expand your usage of the PIM. So I'm curious if there's anything in particular you would say to community edition users to keep in mind to kind of make sure they're setting themselves up for success in enterprise edition, if they do one day decide to expand.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, how is your PIM, right? If you haven't effectively structured your community edition PIM, then it's not going to be a simple migration into EE or enterprise, right, where we can just kind of pick it up and do a dump into there. So I think that's the key. But I think Adam has actually more experience with converting CE to EE users.
Sure. Yeah, I think what Brad said is correct. So I've seen community edition users who are really sophisticated in their use of Akeneo, right? We have a huge ecosystem out there. We have tens of thousands of community edition users, and some of them are really doing some pretty cutting edge things in terms of Akeneo. So I've worked with those types of customers, and migrating over and moving over to enterprise is, I wouldn't say entirely seamless, but they have that good core of structure. They've thought about their business teams and they've built their data model correctly. So moving over to enterprises is relatively simple. Of course, we still need to understand how they can use these new enterprise features that they have access to, and there's some learning there and some opportunities. Really, is how we like to think about it, right? Look what you've been doing today in your great community edition, but there's a lot more potential. So we want to work with them to explore that. But then we do have some community edition customers sometimes as part of the process of engaging with Akeneo. Maybe they're looking at eventually moving to enterprise, but they'll kind of download the CE edition and start working with it, and then they decide to move on to enterprise, but they haven't built out that full structure. And in that case, we launch it almost like a new project. We try to kind of use whatever we can from their community edition, but it could be a little bit different. So again, it really just depends on the sophistication. Either way, we'll lead the customer to success, and there's always great opportunities. So it's a great way for us to begin a project, because at least at the very least, even if it's a customer that's relatively new to the CE edition and hasn't been working with it too long, they're going to already be familiar with some of the capabilities. So it does make our job easier, and it certainly usually leads to a more seamless integration.
Moving from CE to EE is well worth it. You get a lot of really great benefits and features that we're releasing all the time. So it's a really beneficial move.
Awesome. And Adam, you mentioned making your job easier, and it kind of made me laugh because I know everyone's jobs have obviously been disrupted. We're all working from our home offices rather than together down in our Somerville office or wherever else people may gather. But it's kind of particularly interesting, I think, for you two, because For those that don't know, Adam and Brad spend a lot of time on the roads and in the air for Akeneo, traveling to visit all our different customers around North America and helping them get up and running. When they're doing these trainings and working with customers and they're telling these stories, these are stories from, for the most part, when they're really on site and working kind of hand in hand with people. And that's obviously not something that's really a possibility right now, not just in the US, but anywhere in the world. And I know from talking to both of you, especially you, Brad, that you're certainly keeping busy, even though you're not traveling. You guys have a long list of projects and trainings and things you're working on. And I'd love maybe if you could give our community a little insight into how your days look now, what you're doing to get people up and running now that you're working out of your offices as we see here and not in Somerville, and certainly not, in California or Florida or anywhere else.
Yeah. So it's funny. It feels like we're even busier now.
Mhm.
But so I think one of the biggest keys is, and I've done this with I've done several remote trainings and workshops so far. And one big thing is up top, I say, listen, this is a weird thing that we're in. Please speak up if your brain feels overfilled, if you're just not, things aren't clicking, just please speak up. But they've been positive. So one thing that really, really helps is engagement in these remote sessions, because one of the key benefits that we find with on-site workshops is you're getting a lot of people into a room that typically are not in a room together, right? And
Right.
that's one of the huge benefits. But having those people all on a call, just keeping up engagement, make sure you're asking questions, make sure you're being a part of the conversation as we go through. And then kind of finally, I'll say this is kind of a weird, not weird, but a different one, is especially for myself being kind of the driver, is to just make sure you have a good mic, make sure your internet is nice and solid. Like, as you can see, I use kind of a professional mic and I'm plugged into the Ethernet. So, just things like that helps make it go much smoother. And like I said, just knowing that we're all in this kind of together, and it's going to
Right.
be a little bit difficult, but it's been great so far. I actually had a really great training with a really engaged group last week, which went swimmingly. So it's going well. So far, so good.
Awesome. And I know you also talked about it on a webinar with our partner C2 Consulting and our new customer, the Granite Group, and kind of gave an even more zoomed in look at this kind of new remote implementation process. So if anyone's curious to see that, you can find it on our blog and get a little bit more of Brad's thoughts on this new strange world we're all living in. Adam, how about you? I know from talking to you that, like Brad, you're just as, if not more, busy these days. So what are some insights or experiences you've had in this kind of weird process of training people remotely?
Yeah, it's been an adjustment. I think Brad and I typically do 2 or 3 days on site with our customers, and they're very intense workshops. I know I usually finish at the end of the day, and I feel like I've just run a marathon. Like, you're just mentally exhausted. You're thinking and you're moving and you're drawing on the board, and it's
Yeah.
yeah, and it's a good intense process where we get a lot of good feedback. But now we can't do that, obviously. So we've had to adapt and adjust. And I remember right as we started to go full-time remote, I had to join a call with a customer, and they had scheduled originally 8 hours of workshops in one day. And I wasn't leading it, I was kind of participating. And I remember seeing that and saying, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to join that. So luckily they kind of realized halfway through, this isn't, feasible. We got it. It's not sustainable. So they started to break it up. And I used that experience to really kind of realize and work with my customers to make sure that I had very short but engaging, as Brad was saying, sessions, right? So sometimes it's 90 minutes, give me all your attention, and then ask as many questions as you want. And then, okay, everyone can take 15 minutes and step back, recharge, and then we do it again. Because it's very easy if you do 6 hours in a day to lose people's attention. And it's so important that we have everyone engaged for our workshops. So It's definitely been an adjustment. We find ourselves spreading things out a little bit, right? So instead of 2 or 3 intense days, it's spread out over 3-4 weeks. And again, it depends on the customer too. everyone has their own unique needs, especially in this time. Some customers, there's adjustments to teams. Sometimes there's adjusting priorities. Some customers, hey, we want to put this in a little bit of a holding state. Let's start with some basics and then we'll see what happens. And other customers are saying, hey, this is an opportunity for us. Let's get things going now. So just adjusting and kind of meeting each customer's needs is important. And it's been a transition for us.
And that's a good point to be. I think we're especially cognizant because our customers span across a wide array of industries.
Right.
Lots of industries which aren't used to working remote, right? We're a tech company, and we're spread around the world. So keeping that in mind and helping out wherever we can. But also a really important point that Adam made is lots of breaks, right? So I do throw in 15-minute breaks whenever I can, and then give everyone an hour and a half or so for lunch, because people have day jobs, right? And so we want them to be able to do that and kind of reset their brains a little bit.
Gotcha. That was great, guys. And I think that's just going to about do it for this edition of the PXM Pioneers Pulpit. Thanks again for Adam and Brad for joining us. If you missed either of our first 2 episodes with NEI and Products Up last time, or our debut featuring some other members of the Akeneo community, you can find those on our blog. You can also find a lot of great resources and some fun stuff that we've been working to put out there. Newest is an Akeneo home playlist that some folks in the marketing department created with more than 100 songs to help keep you entertained and feeling good during your quarantine when you're working at home. So make sure you share today's episode with a friend you enjoyed it and invite them to view the replay, or check us on our next episode. We'll be sharing the details on that soon. And make sure you join to get some more PXM tips, tricks, best practices, and insight from the community. With that, we'll say thanks again to Brad and Adam, and have a great rest of your day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.